Yuta versus Sukuna is more important than you think. The Queen of Curses versus the King of Curses. The one who disregards it all versus the one whose resolve is rooted in his love for his friends. A matchup a lot of people weren't necessarily expecting due to the fixation of Yuta versus Shinjuku. But with Yuta fulfilling his promise, this clash is rooted in thematic relevance as well as a guide for Gojo's ideals to come to pass. This video will tell you why Yuta vs Sukuna is more important than you originally thought. First, let's tackle the ideological differences between Sukuna and Yuta. Sukuna in essence is a character who's the perfect representation of hedonism, and currently the framework of the series truly blesses those who follow suit with his mentality, an overwhelming sense of self and the disregard of others. In essence, perfectly shows who the character Sukuna is, and has led him to numerous wins, and the story showing us the importance of selfishness in oneself. On the other hand, Yuta also has a weak sense of self, which may be a popular opinion, however it's rooted in the protection of others and an overwhelming desire to protect those that are important to him. This is something I will touch upon a little later. Yuta serves as a major contrast to the series' themes, specifically with the series constantly punishing those who prioritize bonds over oneself. And Uro made an important claim to suggest that Yuta is reaching his cap due to his lack of strong sense of self. But is this entirely true? And based on the story structure, shouldn't Yuta be a character who suffered a lot more losses than he has? The answer is yes, but the complete opposite has occurred. If anything, Yuta is on a similar trajectory as Sukuna, as being the only two undefeated characters with more than 3 fights in the series. This is significant as it portrays Yuta as an exception to the rule, and what could be the reason for that? Now, I read an amazing thread by Detective Chris on Twitter, and also check out his YouTube videos. He has an amazing video on Yuki, and his viewpoint of Volume 0 being outside the framework of the story to represent Yuta constant disproving of Sukuna's ideals was beautiful. In a way, it explained why Yuta is such an anomaly in the series. To paraphrase, Yuta is introduced with the burden of overwhelming strength that isolated the user, and it can be shown directly through Rika. His conclusion is to set Rika free, which in terms means he sacrificed that overwhelming power for bonds, with people reaching the opposite conclusion as Sukuna. In a way, he takes a different approach to Gojo, who constantly fights between the two sides of being the strongest and having strong bonds with others. In essence, the conclusion he came to is that Yuta is removed from the importance in the series and becomes the exception to the rule, and it could be some meta version since his main character arc is completed in Volume 0. And with Yuta being deemed outside the importance of the narrative, it leads to an interesting conversation towards how his jujutsu prowess has excelled during moments outside the narrative in comparison to Sukuna. Sukuna gaining 10 shadows through hijacking Megami's body, keeping the theme of him being a parasite constantly transcending the ages. Being a vessel or a parasite, you take the most out of the user without killing said host for maximum benefit, and this is perfectly shown with Sukuna regaining his agency through the taking of Megami, using his body for the unlimited voids to help him transcend his own technique, leading to the world slash, killing Yuji and reviving him while gaining strength till it was ready to transfer the fingers in the first place. And even the theme of parasites multiplying by having numerous bodies and spreading across the user. Sukuna's fingers fits the description perfectly. The main function of a parasite is to adapt and continue to linger, which ironically fits Sukuna's intrigue into a Shikigami that constantly adapts just like its user. The black box, which was explained in the Gojo vs Sukuna fight to be where curse techniques are engraved, and this steps for huge implications to Sukuna's love for curse energy and the detailing of his curse technique. But what is more interesting is that the parasite taken personality traits of the vessel and can be directly seen with even Yuji-kuna and Megi-kuna having slight differences. Yuji-kuna was on smoke 24/7. Granted, he was always on a time limit, but had a more brawlish personality and took some aspects from Yuji. Whereas Megakuna seems more relaxed, a lot more calculated, and even in his self-reflection, his mannerisms reflect that of Megami's, truly keeping the parasite comparisons. Most importantly, Sukuna represents the ideal of Kenjaku's ultimate goal, or the optimization of curse energy, being the perfect cycle of the Jujutsu pinnacle. My main point from this is Sukuna represents the entire system of curse energy, which leads to an overwhelming love for Jujutsu, and this is taken to an extreme to even his views on self-love, which is rooted in his love for Jujutsu. Whereas Yuta has been completely removed from the narrative, as said before, and even the way his powers have grown have been outside the framework of the series, being in Japan, with implied growth he made has come from his time in Africa with Miguel. Tengen's barriers help to optimize curse energy, yet Yuta's significant growth and power has outside the framework of the series, constantly pushing he's an outlier to the series. Even his powers is rooted in sacrifice, and continued the burden of a Jujutsu sorcerer, which is the entire premise of wielding Jujutsu to protect others. When he acquires curse speeches after Inumaki has fallen in battle. The same applies for both True Shikigami and Uruskai manipulation. It seems intentional that Yuta is carrying the burden and uses the curse techniques not for the love of Jujutsu like Sukuna, but to primarily achieve his goal. Do you need another example? Well, Yuta is from Sendai Colony, where he grew up with Rika, and his origins being the Sugiwara hold significant importance within this context. Another shout out to Detective Chris. He done gave me extra notes for this and he really made this video 100 times more informative than it originally was, so please do check out his channel. Sugiwara clan that rose to prominence in the Heian era, and both Yuta and Gojo are descendants from both clans. The Fujiwara clan, which holds significance here, especially with Sendai being made from the Daimyo Masamune, and continues the importance of the Fujiwara clan. The Shibuya incident also holds importance towards the Fujiwara, in which the vicinity of the Meiju Jinguru, if I butcher any names you're just going to have to charge it to the game, I'll be real, a dignified member of the Fujiwara clan, is where the entire Shibuya incident occurs. Now to circle back into some lore, during the Heian period, the Fujiwara dominated from a historical standpoint and held even greater power than the Sugiwara and the royal family. The Sugiwara were powerful figures who held the majority of the political power until they were overtaken by the Fujiwara, detailing the conflicts between Fujiwara and Sugiwara. Well, the importance of this lies in both Yuta and Gojo being from the said family. Gojo is literally removed from the importance of the show in Fujiwara dominated era, where Gojo is sealed, and conveniently Yuta is exempt from the carnage that was Shibuya. It's also important that Sukuna, who's deemed as the pinnacle of the Heian era, was someone who the Fujiwara residents would pray to, Sukuna for the crops and the harvest, and to prevent conflict between the two, serving as the pinnacle of his era. Ironically, in the Shinjuku showdown, the pinnacle of his era is then overthrown by the Heian era influence, and once again the Sugiwara falls. But where does Yuta play all into this? Well, Key Volume Extra shows that Yuta for one takes little interest in himself, and specific in relation to his origins. Now this is significant as it shines a light on the limited impact his origins play in the never-ending feud between the Sugiwara and Fujiwara, and is perfectly detailed in Sendai, his birthplace. Up against a representative of the Fujiwara, Uro. By all means, the connections Gege has done, Yusha should follow suit in the manner, with Yuta losing, continuing the trend of the Sugiwara falling to the Fujiwara. But the complete opposite occurs, breaking the cycle of Sugiwara falling to the Fujiwara, putting more emphasis on Yuta being an outlier to the system. Now to wrap back to the main talking point, this explains why, like Sukuna, Yuta is a character who's always shown to be in a good light, and is also constantly disproving the story's narrative and bodes to an interesting question. Is Uro wrong? Well, yes and no. Uro is right, as the story in its totality bends its will towards Sukuna's mindset, but Yuta seems to be an exception to this role and is constantly disproving the narrative, as by all means he should not be as successful as he is. I also think there's an underlying stronger sense of self people choose to ignore with Yuta, not only being confident in his abilities, but his overwhelming desire to protect those important to him can come across as selfish. Moments such as talking to Geto and Uro, where he doesn't want to understand Geto, rather protect those he holds dear, is very human but also selfish in not wanting to hear other perspectives. This mindset is taken even further with Uro, where he's imposing his life values of loved ones and bonds onto Uro to suggest she should act another way, which is why Uro reacts so negatively to Yuta. In essence, what's more important, in my opinion, is staying true to your nature and your values. Example of a character who constantly battles between that is Megumi, where Sumiki is a constantly limiting factor for him, going all out, but this discussion will be saved for a future Megami video. In essence, the groundwork for Sukuna and Yuta's ideological clash had already been set up through both series and poses an interesting question to who will be right in the end. Sukuna's self-love leads to an imposing curse on himself, which inherently leads him to always search for more. Even the gluttony allegories fit with him having multiple bodily functions and always looking for the next source of entertainment. Multiple mouths, food analogies in his dialogue, he's always looking for more, which sets up a potential dilemma for the King of Curses. If Sukuna is content with living to his stature, is there not a cap to how much one can find entertainment in? Especially if there's no one left to play with. Pause. What we are leading to is a stumbling block in Sukuna's whole mindset, which will be an interesting thing Gege explores, but is there a cap to how much humans can pass the time if there's no one left that's interesting? On the contrast, it could suggest that curses can inherently be a blessing, as shown through someone as Toji, and through meeting his son does he have true liberation through the chains of the Zenin clan. In the same case, Sukuna could represent the same, but that is a conversation for another day. But in the manner of Yuta, his showcase of love is both twisted and a blessing. The creation of Rika with an underlying love to keep his loved one alive, yet concluded with a beautiful story of setting her free. But what happens next is what interests me because inherently curses are seen to be negative. The liberation of Rika ends up leaving her will, which ends up being something that protects Yuta, making the perspective the nature of a curse is dependent on the outlook of the user. To enforce that point, Yuta uses his curses to save people, especially those close to him, in contrast to Sukuna's whose curse allows him to transcend and relish in Jujutsu. But Yuta, an individual who has no interest in fights, his sense of urgency to get stronger correlates with his initial sacrifice for bonds, and it poses a good question on whether self-love or external love is the correct answer from two powerhouses on the opposite spectrum. It's taken even further when Rika and Yuta promise is for them to get married, and when we next see Yuta back in the Sendai colony, he channels Rika's full power through a ring, delivering on that curse, which keeps the theme of curses can be positive or negative depending on the interpretation. This nicely fits to Gojo's line of love is the most twisted curse of all, which nicely represents Yuta's character arc. It will also give us a greater answer to the question of is self-love more important than bonds with others, and it could kind of contradict even Sukuna's mindset to suggest that he himself is even wrong to an extent. The fact that we even have some self-reflection and this coming through an understanding of having his soul intertwined with another human plays onto a different type of perspective with Yuta's coming through the example of cursing his loved one who also was a human to this curse. So I think this kind of discussion in terms of the conclusion that it can come from is something that is very, very interesting and will most likely be delved more into during this clash. Now the second layer I'd like to explore is the importance of Yuta being successful in this clash and laying the seeds of Gojo's will to be inherited by his students. Gojo's ideology was having strong allies to change the Jujutsu world, and also to never feel that the loneliness he felt. Yuta being the strongest modern day sorcerer, spearheading that is significant as it shows the next steps our students can go towards reaching that goal. The time skip has left the students' power level super ambiguous, but I feel that this is a pivotal moment in how we stack up towards that goal. And with the strongest student leading the way, it sets everything in motion for the Gojo goal to be successful. Now to answer the most important question, how will Yuta fare in this clash? And what are we expecting from the strongest modern day sorcerer? I know we are against Sukuna, so a lot of people are still going to have negative opinions, but believe in the students. My opinion has been consistent that I don't think any of the main crop of students won't do something significant and will actually show out. So in this instance, I do think we'll have moments where Yuta and Rika actually do fight against Sukuna solo. However, one thing that I do think will be interesting is a team up that Yuji and Yuta having the two main MCs play a pivotal role to having success against Sukuna. Not to emphasize, I don't see Yuta or the gang defeating Sukuna now, especially as Sukuna has declared his interest into fighting the merger. However, in 220, Yuji, Maki and Yuta were discussing plans to save Megami, and I believe with Maki still missing, this will lead to a very key moment where they successfully save Megami. However, Sukuna survives, leading to a bigger clash later. And I think this is going to be something very important because the plans towards Megami has been multiple. We saw there's one through Higuruma which has looked to be failed, there was one that they have been discussing which we still don't know, and Yuji even himself reaffirmed he has his own ideals. With Yuta being the strongest sorcerer currently there, it feels as if it's setting up nicely for them to really get that success of bringing him back, while potentially not necessarily, but leaving significant damage to Sukuna, who then moves away from this clash, and there'll be like a rematch later on in the series, as I don't think that we're going to end this whole Sukuna fight right now. But to those doubting Yuta, especially at this point of the story, we can't save you all, and it's very obvious he's about to cook. Now my slight predictions, and I think we will get a Yuta domain reveal, which could be pretty interesting because a lot of people are still waiting to see. And with the way the story has portrayed that Sukuna most likely can't use his domain as well, it would be the perfect time. We also see his curse techniques he has copied and potentially see what he has applied. I know one of the running theories right now is that he has curse spirit manipulation, but I've already touched on that I don't think Yuta is the type of character to kind of deface his best friend's sensei, his sensei's best friend, to the point that he would actually take a limb or blood or whatever the theory of what his technique is. I don't believe he actually does has curse spirit manipulation. But one thing that a lot of people have not necessarily talked about is the last finger, and maybe Yuta himself has done something with it if we go through the theory that Gojo saved it. If not, I think we may see things maybe such as Boogie Woogie or some old curse techniques from the previous sorcerers that we haven't seen now, which could really add to his whole arsenal. So I think this is a real first time we're really going to see Yuta go all out and fully distinguish his bag. I mean, just right now we see that Rika looks far larger than it was before, so he's obviously had some significant training to be far stronger than he was before. And I think even with the fact that I don't think it's confirmed, but there is some theories that he used a dismantle. The only reason why I don't think it is a dismantle that Yuta clashed with is for the simple fact with Kusakabe's POV saying that a close range dismantle would kill the person. However, if you believe that his reinforcement has got high enough that now he can block that dismantle, then I think that is a different thing, and it just shows a testament to how much stronger they have got. And I think the most important underlying thing is what they could have learned from Gojo Sukuna, as we've already seen Higuruma adapt things from that fight. So things such as maybe his domain conditions, his usage of RCT to maybe extend his weakness of 5 minutes counter, because now he's against Sukuna, so now the 5 minutes may be a little bit more significant. But I think overall this will be a key moment for our students and will be spearheaded by the cursed child Yuta Okkotsu.